JD Vance went on Fox News, did an interview, had some tough questions, I'd say. I was actually impressed, and it's just so refreshing listening to JD Vance talk. So we'll watch this clip and we'll talk about it.
Say those egregious things that you cite that I would think all Americans are against.
Sure.
That's a small fraction of the millions of people who are here, who have built lives. Many of them have been here for decades.
So you do have hundreds of thousands, maybe even 1 million people who, in addition to crossing into the border illegally, have also committed some measure of violent crime. So it's actually a very large number of people, Shannon. And the point is that if you want to fix the overall border crisis, you have to engage in law enforcement. We can't buy into this lie, really from the extreme left, because I agree with you. Most Americans want common sense border enforcement. We can't buy into this lie that law enforcement at the American southern border is somehow not compassionate to families who want to cross illegally. Our number one responsibility is compassion to our fellow Americans, and that starts with enforcing the southern border. You cannot have a country of law and order, of stability, of basic good governance unless you get control of what Biden has left us at the American southern border.
I mean,
President Trump is committed.
Almost makes me feel like that there's the meme that goes around the internet where Don Draper's like totally drunk and he gets up there and he's making the pitch.
Yeah.
And people use it to just talk about the craziest things in the world. It's like, what if we actually, I don't know, had a American government for our own citizens?
Yeah, it is that.
Like our first responsibility to the people in our own country. Like, wow, it's kind of radical.
I think this is all obviously connected. I mean, I hear this and we talk about the looting going on in California. It's impossible to have a functioning nation that works unless you have law and order. Like the concept of justice.
And it's not working right now because we don't have it.
Quite obviously not working right now. We've lost the idea of justice. And justice, we need to have justice delivered by the people that we put in charge to govern us. You can't have a functioning society without a shared concept of justice. And of course, it's completely unjust to have a wild southern border in which just about anyone can walk over because they can walk into Army Reserve camps and take Humvees, or they can loot celebrities' homes in LA. Right. Like people are thinking, this is so unthinkable. Why would someone do that to a fellow American? Well, one, a lot of them are not Americans and have no loyalty and have no buy-in to what we're trying to do and create here in American. So it's obvious to me that those people would not care about their neighbor, especially if they're whipped up on, oh, they're rich, they can afford it, whatever, who cares if they burn down? But it's common sense here. And actually a very Catholic sentiment to what's the idea of subsidiarity? At first you owe to God, then you owe to yourself, then you owe to your neighbor, specifically the closest to you. I think Ryan Raisins brought up in this thread that specifically Thomas Aquinas says citizens, he uses the word citizens, the people around you, nearest you, are owed that justice, that compassion first. And it's like, what were we doing the last 4 years? I mean, obviously you look at Biden saying stuff now. I think recently this is a complete counter to, he just extended the temporary protected status for 900,000 people using a Bush era law with the DHS. So this is 1,900 Sudanese, 103,000 Ukrainians, 232,000 Salvadorians, and 600,000 Venezuelans, which if Venezuela causes you to pause, yes, because we have legitimate Venezuelan gang activity going on in our country, which is just crazy to say out loud, will now be able to stay in the U.S. for another 18 months. This program was created by Congress in 1980 to grant legal work authorization and deportation protections to immigrants from countries suffering from natural disasters.
Well, and this is the mechanism when we covered Springfield, Ohio, and remember the cats and the dogs and all that. TPS, or temporary protected status, is the mechanism by which these working class American towns are being completely overwhelmed by the increase in population. And that's even not considering the violent gangs. Look at the Venezuela numbers. Venezuelan gangs are the ones occupying apartment complexes in Colorado. This is insane. It's the definition of insanity.
But the biggest part of that TPS that bothers me is that T says
temporary, right?
Temporary. I used to live in Northern Virginia, and they had granted temporary protective status to people, involved, like it was like a Nicaraguan mudslide or earthquake or something that happened in 2001. They were still there when Trump was sworn in office in 2017. It's like 16 years doesn't sound temporary. I mean, that's a kid being born and going halfway through high school.
Right. Which is the point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, again, the purpose of a system, but like you can yell at, well, you guys don't seem like you're doing things right. It's like this is on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The elites in this country do this on purpose. They want it to be like this. They call it temporary protective status, but it's not. Biden wants these people here for 20 years, 40 years, 60 years. They don't care.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I don't think he's awake at the wheel right now, personally.
Well,
Yeah,
whoever signed the document the same
Right.
way.
Yeah, I loved in this interview that he brought up the word compassion.
Our number one responsibility is compassion to our fellow Americans, and that starts with enforcing the southern border.
Because I think that in the church is where we get the controversy, right, within the Catholic Church about, well, how do we deal with migration and immigration? And like, we get people telling us, oh, mass deportation is against Catholic social teaching and blah, blah, blah. And the word compassion there, because we all want to serve the gospel and we all want to be compassionate. But when we apply reason to it, the way that he does in this thread here, and the way that J.D. Vance does, we have to realize that our compassion must be ordered. We can't treat everyone in our lives with the same measure of responsibility for them. And I think he brought up the example of a mother and multiple children. We would expect her to prioritize the needs of her own child. And it would be weird if I just like walked into a daycare and there's 35 babies running around and I ignore my own children and start like trying to care for all of them. It's not going to help any of those children.
Yeah,
And-
well, even to take that point, like another example of that,
Yeah.
like if you're in your house and you're taking care of your kids and you see someone like a thief run across, go into someone's house, rob across the street, and you see that,
Mhm.
like, oh, I'll just leave my kids inside this
Right.
house. Little tiny Erica go across the street and try to apprehend the criminal. Like,
Right.
that would be really dumb. Like,
or
no.
offer him a sandwich. Be like, hey, come welcome the stranger. Come to my house and have lunch with us. No.
But like this idea that what J.D. Vance is saying is that we should our own government, the people we elect. It's our government. These are people we elect. They're supposed to represent the citizens of the country,
Mhm.
and they should take care of the needs of the citizens first. And anytime we say that, like, hey, maybe we shouldn't let millions of people come into our country illegally. Maybe we should stop that. And then we're called racist, xenophobic, bigoted for wanting to prioritize the needs of the compassionate needs of our people. Like we have devastated, people in North Carolina who are still living in tents for, months
Right.
after this hurricane hit. Now we have a situation in Los Angeles that's going to take a lot of need and help. Like we should prioritize our citizens.